Honey, I'm home!
What are you trying to do now?
Why yes, do you like it? It's you, but me, and richer, and therefore better.
No, but you're wearing my thing, like, what, why?
Well, you see, I had a plan that came up in my brain over here. After all, you earn like maybe $5 on this internet thing of yours all the time, right? If that's the case, if I were to copy you, I would earn at least $5, which is more than the zero right now, and I can use that $5 to invest in a Nigerian prince who will give me even more money.
Sorry, I don't follow at all. How was this supposed to help you clear your debt?
Well, yes, I kind of got the idea from playing this game, which copied an even better game. And I don't know how it went, but I'm sure it went well for them.
You know, if that was the story you took away from this game, I guess no, that's not a good thing either way. You probably just wasted more money, and I think like if you were actually trying to follow what was mentioned or what they did in this game and copy another game, you're probably gonna see a very untimely demise as well. So I'm gonna do the usual. I'll do you a favor and make a video about this. I can explain to you and your little small brain why trying to do something like that isn't a good idea.
Very well, you can have that. Go make your silly video, maybe you'll earn you another $5, and me copying you will pay off even more. Well, until then, I'll be smelling you later, peasant.
Yeah, sure. Let me just get on to it, I guess. Could you just stop with the clothing, by the way? It's kind of freaking me out a little. I'm sure we've all had those experiences before, right? You saw a new game, the cover looked really cool, and you went like, oh, that looks like it'll be really fun, I can't wait to buy it and play it and be a big gamer. And then you finally purchase the game, you sit down to play it, and you realize that something about the game just looks really familiar. Well, today's game that we're going to be talking about is exactly one of those games, except this one actually went so badly that it almost got considered one of the worst games in Japan of 2007. 2007, the year where the game that would revolutionize the tier list actually came out as well. The game that was just the creme de la creme of the Kusoge world. A game that was initially planned to be a whole multimedia IP, but just fell so flat that nothing really came out of it after the game release. And it was so bad that it also spawned its own meme that would last within Japan on message boards for a long time to come. And yes, the game we're going to be talking about today is... I don't know why I said yes as if you guys already know what it is, but it's probably in the title. You guys know what it is. It's... Where did it go? Oh, there it was. Elvandia Story. So this game was actually created by Spike back in 2007, and yes, that is the same Spike that would later go on to merge to form Spike Chunsoft. And this title just so happened to have been their attempt at creating their own multimedia franchise at the time. And I'm not joking when I say that they were actually trying to create a multimedia franchise, because alongside the game, they also created a manga as well for the series of the same name. Except that unlike the actual game, this actually chronologically takes place in the world 100 years before the game setting. So you can tell that they were really actually trying to go for a fairly deep, in-depth like world building for this entire series that they were planning out. The manga itself was actually not too bad. Like, I actually read through most of it. The story itself is a little cliche, but it's actually fairly dark and actually had its like emotional moments. The only funny thing is that it actually ends off on a cliffhanger over here, which says that it'll continue in volume 2, and then it just goes on into an introduction for the PS2 game instead, with all of the introduction for all the characters and the like. Volume 2 never came out. That's how bad it did. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, this would then go on to form one of the earlier memes on the Japanese internet on some of the message boards as well. It's the one where you have the little rambuta and then the name of the title of the thing and then go at the end, and it just runs and then blows up in the end. Apparently that originated from this game, and it will go on to be used to meme some of the other things that come out, some of the other games, especially the Kusoge games that come out in the future, like the Zoids one, and it was also used to meme the PSP Go when it released at the time as well, just because of the way that it was named and the fact that people really weren't expecting the console to do well either. In terms of its actual rating on the Famitsu Cross review, this one was actually fairly middling. Like when we look at some of the more, well, Kuso titles that we've talked about in the past, the ones that did the worst were all below 20. Like I think the worst one we have seen so far is Pro Golfer Saru at 12. And this was like the historical lowest point that a game had actually managed to reach. And aside from that, Last Rebellion, which we last talked about, was at 24. So this game being at 23, it's slightly better than most of the ones we've talked about, which didn't even manage to make it into 20. But even then, it is still within the territory of Kuso game. And like, yeah, I don't think it was any much of a surprise to people who did see the game that this game would actually be considered slightly worse than Last Rebellion as well. Because at least with Last Rebellion, you kind of had something unique going on for it. But with this game, a large part of why it failed, aside from the poor quality that it seemed to showcase prior to its release, and this is something that some people came to find out later on as well, was that this game seems to have copied quite a few of its systems from Fire Emblem, and also a little bit from Final Fantasy Tactics, because, you know, if you're going to copy all of the big titles, the strategy games at the time, why not copy all of them? Although I guess I didn't really copy Langrisser to the same extent as well. But either way, in spite of the fact that it copied all of the systems from all of these other games, it somehow miraculously managed to make a game that was worse than all of them as well. Now, before we go on though, let me just preface this, because I feel like this needs to be said as a form of clarification as well, that I'm not saying that the game did badly because it copied. Like, personally, as someone who's worked in the game industry for quite a while now, I would say that, especially in this day and age, it's a lot harder to make something that is 100% wholly original, because most things that people can think of, somebody somewhere in the world where like 7 billion people, and it probably has already tried it at some level. No matter how original you try to be, someone probably has either tried it and failed, and so you've never heard of it, or has tried it and succeeded, and you just haven't seen it yet. And so to some extent, some level of games seeming alike is to be expected. And the thing is that if a system feels like it works well in your game, and you feel that using the system that some other game has made and used in the past in your game would actually make your game even better, I really don't see a point in the whole like, oh, you copied him, therefore your game bad, like sort of thinking at all. Especially if it can lead to more interesting and innovative products overall, due to the mixture of the systems that you have thought of and that others have used in the past, that you can then improve on as well. It's just that even in spite of that stance, this game just fucking sucks balls. Like, it's just so bad. It's actually baffling to me how they managed to copy so many of these systems within these games, but failed so spectacularly on the execution that this game actually became as much of a chore to play as it was. Because I'm someone who actually enjoys a lot of these kind of strategy games. I played most of the Fire Emblem games when I was young as well. Like, all of the games up until Three Houses I've actually played at some point in time. And like, for me, these kind of games, I could sit through them for hours on end, just like playing through each stage by stage, especially for the older titles. But even in spite of that, with this game, I could barely sit through like hour-long sessions of it without starting to feel like I was getting a headache because of how badly designed it was. How badly designed? Let's find out together. So when we first fire up the game, I feel like it wasn't actually too bad looking. Like, the opening animation, it's a little dated for 2007, but even then, it looked pretty well done nonetheless. The music was actually pretty fire and I enjoyed it, so everything still looks fine. You get to the menu, everything seems peaceful and as what you would expect a normal game to do. And the fact that it was voiced also was kind of impressive, although it seems like kind of inconsistent for some weird reason. Like, at the start of the game, when you first meet the main protagonist and you see all of his family members and friends, everything at that point is still fully voiced, and I thought it was pretty cool. So, but the thing is that as you progress through the game, you start to see like a degradation of those where like more and more characters aren't voiced. Like, we're not even just talking about like, oh, the enemy mooks that you're gonna kill for the stage, the big bad of each individual stage isn't voiced. I feel like if it was just that, it wouldn't be as weird or immersion breaking. But even for some of the core characters within the story, like some of the people that you meet and save along the way, they just have no voice at all. So like, you would have a conversation where because those are recurring characters, they would like constantly come back in the plot, where in the middle of the conversations you just suddenly get a blank out where there's just no voice acting. So for me, as I was like trying to listen to it instead for some of the parts instead of just like following all by text, it actually felt a little tempo breaking just to have the voices cut out and me having to come back and double check the screen to make sure what they're saying. But aside from that, overall the start of the game gave a fairly decent impression. Like, yeah, it's not on the level of something like Fire Emblem, but it still looked like it would be a decent adventure until you get to the first battle in the game, and then things start to get really downhill from there. For those of you who are wondering, this is basically what the animations within the first battle actually look like. It's really just a lot worse than many of its contemporaries, even the game that this was supposedly based off of, and also compared to the Fire Emblem games that were releasing at the same time when this game released in the form of Radiant Dawn. Which, for the record, I know Radiant Dawn released in 2007, but we're not comparing this game to Radiant Dawn because of the fact that this game was basically, like, there's no way for them to realistically base the game off of Radiant Dawn, considering they both came out in the same year. This game was supposedly based off of half of Radiance instead, the one with Ike as the main character. How do we know this, you may ask? Well, I mean, once you start the first battle and you look at the UI, it's kind of like... I don't know, like, something seems really familiar there, you know, just a hunch. The color themes for the enemy and the player as well, and somehow in spite of that they managed to make the UI worse. Like, one thing they did that I felt made it a lot harder to keep track of the number of attacks was that in Fire Emblem, whenever you actually had a character who could hit multiple times a turn, they would put the multiplier, the ×2, in a separate font and color outside of the attack itself. So while you had most of the parameters of the attack stat in the box that will pop up, just the multiple attack was the one thing that will pop out at you and make it obvious to the player that you were going to attack multiple times. For some reason, they decided to put this into the text box itself instead. So while I won't say that it's impossible to pass, it makes it a lot harder to at first glance look at the numbers. Aside from that, the main character stats as well were basically lifted from Ike's. So this is Ike's actual like stats. And this is the stats for the main character of this game, Ashley. As you can see, the stats are almost clearly identical, except that Ashley has 1 HP more than Ike. So it's like, I find that really funny because it just feels like they're just like trying to take a piss on Fire Emblem a little by making him just that little bit better than Ike, as if they're trying to hint something. Although I feel like if they were to try to make this realistic to what actually happened, I think his HP would probably be like 1 or 2 instead. And more importantly than everything we've talked about up to this point is just the fact that this happened when I reached the final boss of the stage. Yeah, so in case anyone here is actually wondering what exactly is happening here, basically the game just like soft locks or soft freezes, I guess, where the game's music and the animation of the characters idling on the map continue to play, but nothing is actually happening at this point. The game has essentially frozen. You can't open the menu, you can't push any buttons to progress the stage, and you're just waiting for the PS2 to finally fry from being left on forever waiting for the shitstorm to solve itself. And yeah, so like, this is a weird thing. I don't know if it's just my copy of the game that had this issue, but for some reason every single boss does this, where if I were to go in and try to attack the boss, the game would soft freeze like this. And at some point, even some of the enemies, like random mooks attacking me, also cause this to happen. It seems to have to do with, I think, like maybe some of the data for some of the attack animations being missing and the game not knowing how to deal with it. So I feel like it might actually be a problem with my disc, but even when I purchased a second copy of the game, the same issue still persisted. So initially I thought like, I could just get around this by getting the boss to attack me as well. It's a bit of a very silly handicap since you have to stand beside the boss and let the boss attack you and kill him on the counter attack, but at least the game could progress. But yeah, when it started to happen, the random mooks attacking me instead, it got to the point where it was so bad I wasn't sure if the game could be progressed on. Thankfully, this could still be solved by turning off the in-game animation, so that took away one of my sole enjoyments of this genre of games. And on top of that, when you do set the game to maximum speed, the characters, when you command them to walk to a position, for some reason they still walk at base speed, and like for some other they just feel like they're crawling across the screen instead, and you have to hold down the circle button to speed them up even at maximum speed. I feel like that could have been improved as well. Like, if you're gonna set the game on maximum speed, the character, when you select the character and the endpoint, it should just like zoom to the endpoint instead. Like, this is the whole point of why people are accelerating the game in the first place. They kind of want to skip the animations in general. So having it be at base speed, even at the maximum speed for like half the time, that all of that just feels really weird. Speaking of slow, like many things in this game, like just feel like they just built to waste your time. Like even the UI transitions themselves, like when you open the character selection screen, in order to set characters at the start of the stage, you need to open that screen individually each time for each character slot. So like if you have like 10 slots on the map, you need to go to the slot, push the button, open the menu, go to the character selection menu, pick the character, and then the whole menu closes to show the character on the spot. Then you need to reopen the whole thing again, which, you know, if the game actually opened the menus fast, it wouldn't be a problem. But as you can see, like each menu opening was a scroll open, and even at max speed, it actually plays this entire animation bit by bit. So the whole thing just feels really slow and frustrating to just even set up your party. Alright gang, the enemy are all over there. It's time for us to take them out once and for all. Everyone, get in positions. I'll tell you guys where to stand. Jeffrey, you over there. Blan, you stand over there. Hey boss, I really have to ask, is there any reason why you're unfolding that scroll every single time you give one of us an order? Like, couldn't you give it to all of us at once? Why, of course, Jeffrey. It's for the aesthetics. It's very important. After all, if we're gonna beat the enemy, we gotta make sure we beat them with style. Yeah, but the enemy is right over there. They're gonna attack us at this rate. I don't know if they're gonna just wait for us forever to slowly wait for you to aesthetics your way through this. Aesthetics! Well, I guess this is what we get. I get the Red Noble to be our leader. The game doesn't even have an auto set button where it just like puts the first 10 people in your party onto the slots or something so that you don't have to think about it. They actually like go through each and every single laborious step of forcing you to put each individual character there. So when you reach the point where you have to put like 14 to 15 characters, just setting up for the stage takes a long time. That, and during the character selection stage, you don't really have any form of like image to signify which character you're selecting right now. Like there isn't like the mini like icon or the character model there to show you like this is this person. It's just a name and a class, which you could say that like, yeah, that's enough for you to know that this is the specific person. But the thing with these types of games is that you do tend to have a lot of characters. I think there were like more than 20 characters in this game. I can't remember all of them right through just the name and class alone from the very start of the game. It actually is a lot more difficult, especially because of some other issues that we'll be mentioning later in this video. And I feel like having just even that little icon there to help, especially with the less important like supporting characters who like have one appearance and then join your party and then don't really interact with the main story much. Especially for those characters, this will have helped in helping to differentiate the characters, so it'll be easier to figure out who is who. Then you have the item drops as well, and it's like, oh my fucking god, the item drops. Like, I don't understand what they were thinking when they dealt with the item dropping system. So like, for those of you who have played like something like Fire Emblem before, right, with that game, item drops are fairly rare, and it's like you would see very specific enemies on the map who, when you would click on the character details, you would see like a little green item or something, like an item that flashes. Obviously they tell you this drops. Those tend to be very infrequent, and I guess in part of it it's because of the fact that they wanted you to, especially in the earlier titles, manage your weapons and your equipment inventory as well. So they want you to use the weapons as sparingly as possible and like save up and try to balance the usage of the weaker and the stronger ones to ensure that you have the right things for the right time. And so item drops are a lot rarer, but with this game, it feels like almost every enemy just seems to drop their weapons. I had one stage where every single enemy on the map was dropping an item when defeated or two. And the thing with the item drop animation as well is that it's so fucking slow! Like every single time, it would like slowly open up the scroll and tell you you got the item and you have to push through it. And the worst part is that because every single character on some stages are dropping items, it's very easy for your characters, especially the stronger ones that kill multiple enemies within the course of that single battle, to end up with a flooded inventory, and then every single time you get a new item, they will ask you to like figure out which item you want to put into your storage instead. Like, dropping a lot more items feels great from like a player perspective in terms of like you're getting more shit, you have more stuff on hand at any given time to deal with all of the enemies that come your way, so like it feels more relaxed of a gameplay experience compared to how stressful some people might have found Fire Emblem to have been back in the day. But they could have just sped it up a lot more, have it just pop up instantly, be something you could just push through. And even then, I feel like the drop rate of the items that enemies gave you was just a little too extreme. Like, I actually ended up with so much stuff in the storage that like I think half of the weapons I got were just never used by the time I had completed the entire game, because every single enemy just kept dropping so many different weapons that you could not even get through all of it in time for the game to end. Which then brings up the question of, why were every single enemy dropping items to this extent? You're wasting our time! Also, the game has some weird UX issues, and by this I mean some weird user experience issues, in the sense that some of the things in the game, in terms of the readability, are just also not very clear. For example, there's also the fact that for some of the enemies and allies, while some of your allies are labeled with a blue color sometimes, and sometimes the other parties or other factions that are friendly or neutral are labeled green on the turn thing, sometimes they just have them in red as well. So like you have the enemies who are all labeled red. It's also kind of like FE in a way, where when the turn banner comes in, it's red, the enemy's faction banner is red, the units on the field are red. Then sometimes you have allies that are also fully red, but when the banner comes up, it's green, which makes it very difficult on first glance to tell who's an ally and enemy when you look at a field, because everybody looks exactly the same. I don't know why they did that. It's a very small thing to some people, but to me, it's one of those things where you could have just done that little bit to have improved it instead. Another small nitpick, perhaps, to some people is that in the Japanese that they use for the game itself, they use tairyoku, which is this kanji over here, for the attack damage that you do. It's not exactly wrong, I guess, because tairyoku can be actually translated to mean physical strength as well, but this is more physical strength in the sense of like typically when it's used in real life, they're talking about your physical capability to be able to lead a healthy life. So things like your stamina are more like how physically strong are you to be able to live healthily instead. It might sound a little weird, but as a result of that, most games typically use it to mean something like stamina or your HP instead. Seeing it used for the attack stat itself is very weird. I feel like most games either use Kogeki Ryoku, which is this, which literally just means attack power, or they just use Chikara, which means like power on its own. Like these two tend to be more common, or in some RPGs they actually just use ATK as well. Just a very small thing, but considering where we are in 2025 in particular, it just felt a little more confusing than it would have been. Maybe back then there might have been still a little more inconsistency between games, so maybe it still worked out. But suffice to say, even within the genre itself, most games don't use tairyoku for the attack stat. So even then, I don't know why they decided to use this. Maybe they thought it fit better, but overall, especially as the industry has developed, it has only become more and more confusing to look at this stat and try to connect it with your attack stat instead. That and the balance of this game is just completely off the rocker. Like, it actually feels quite demented and insane how they have balanced this game at points. Like, as someone whose job for almost 10 years in this industry, a large part of it has been to deal with game balance, economy bit balance, as well as level design, seeing some of the decisions that they made in this game just feels so insane to me. It actually just triggers me a little. In spite of the fact that they copied most of the systems, they somehow managed to modify them in ways that managed to expertly fuck up everything that would have made a game not shitty. For example, they somehow managed to cause the game to lean into the extremity where almost every single attack an enemy does either does half your HP in damage or no damage at all. Like, the thing, and the reason why I feel this is happening is because of the fact that they added in more equipment slots instead. So while something like Fire Emblem, which they copied the stat systems and the damage formula from, it only uses the character's base stats as well as the weapon stat. For this game, they also added a shield equipment that you could equip to some characters as well as the accessory slot. And because of this, I feel like the character's base armor and physical defense stats are a lot higher than in Fire Emblem. And as a result, you tend to see characters that don't take any damage at all. Like, up till like maybe the final boss, like the main character's stats are just so cracked that I was just taking 0 damage half the time. Like I found the game to be this very weird balance of my entire party being consisting either of people who took 0 damage at all from everything, or people who took half their HP from everything because of how the game's stats and equipment have been designed. And it's not just your party that has this issue, like especially in the early game, you also suffer from this a lot when facing the enemy because they actually do stat out the enemies quite a fair bit. So you do end up in a lot of situations where you and the enemy both have like maybe like 20 HP, but you're all doing like 1 to 2 damage to each other. And I feel like that in part is what leads to the game feeling very slow as well, because half your party basically does no damage to the enemy. Like I found it really weird that on the stage where you get a character introduced to you, like the character is added to your party for the first time, they would go into the stage and half the enemies they would deal 0 damage to. Like that in and of itself feels like very bad design. I feel like if you're going to introduce a character during the stage, the character should at least be able to perform well in that stage, you know, like so you can kind of get a better understanding of how and what situations the character will work best. Like you don't want the character to come in and feel completely useless, because then the player is going to start avoiding using the character altogether. So you typically want to design it in a way such that at the very least you maybe give the player a bit of a hint that like, hey, this character works very well in this specific situation, and you design the map in such a way that they can work out well. Like if you have a pirate character who can walk on water, like some kind of pirate Jesus, you know, you give the map a bit more water so that pirate can walk over it and perform well in ways that helps you flank around the enemies and makes you feel very big brain at understanding how the character works, and so that players will understand the niche or where the character excels, so that they would use it in future maps where there's a situation too. But yeah, because of how badly they designed most of this balance, at some point by like the halfway mark or later throughout all of the stages, I just kind of gave up using a full party. Like even though they would give you like 10 to 15 slots to actually set up party members, I would only put like 3 to 5 people, because why do I need to put 14 people when 5 people are basically fucking Terminators and the other 10 are basically just gonna run in like little babies and just get stabbed and die almost instantaneously? Like the only good thing about all of this is just the fact that characters don't perma-die, because if not for that, I feel like bringing in any of the other characters at all, you'll be completely disincentivized from doing that if anything. But don't worry though, in spite of the fact that it seems like every battle is going to end up becoming an entire Dragon Ball arc where one guy screams at his opponent and monologues for like 6 episodes, thankfully there is a way that you can get out of it. Although I feel like this is also a very poor design, which is the fact that for some reason they decided to design the critical hit damage in the game in a way that the formula is mildly different from Fire Emblems, but in a way that causes the critical damage to be completely cracked out. Like let's just take a look at this for example. Yes, they went from doing 1 damage to 31, basically going from barely chipping the guy to one-shotting him, a 31-fold increase in damage from the crit. Yes, you know, like they somehow managed to actually mess up the critical damage formula to the point that it ended up becoming such that the critical hit damage shrinks in such extremities that if you get hit by the critical hit, especially on the main character for some reason, the main character is gonna die in 1 hit and they're gonna fail the stage, because that's how fucked the whole thing is. Thankfully, we actually get to see the formula so we know what's wrong with it. So for those of you who don't know how the original Fire Emblem formula works, and which leads into how this game's formula works, Fire Emblem and this game both use a fairly simple damage formula where you have a bunch of calculations, but the final calculation is basically your attack's power minus opponent's defensive power equals to damage. Like it translates into the very old attack minus defense equal damage formula. And in case anyone's wondering, no, I'm not here to make fun of the fact that the game uses a simple formula. A simple formula is not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on what the goal of the game is. If the goal of the game is easy understanding of the formula, like you want the formula to be as transparent and how much damage you do to be as transparent to the player and easy to understand as possible, then this works. Many roguelike titles still use this to very good effect. Even games like Slay the Spire use this, for example. Yes, you have multipliers on attack and defense, and your attack and defense are more like just your individual card's attack stat versus the opponent's shield or whatever stat they have at the time and vice versa. But it works well, especially in games where you don't expect too much scaling in terms of the power levels. And in the Fire Emblem games, I believe that is part of the reason why it was done this way. Granted, there is a little bit more complication to it in that the attack damage that you deal is first calculated using a slightly more complicated formula of you take the character's strength plus the weapon's might, because the weapon has its own stat, plus the weapon triangle bonus would then be added onto that as well. All of this would then be multiplied by the attack's effectiveness coefficient, and then you would add on any supporting bonuses outside of that after all of the calculation have been done. And all of this would basically be done to calculate your attack, and once the attack's been calculated, you just deduct it from the defense. So the thing with the formula and what makes it different from Elvandia Story over here though is that the critical hit damage in Fire Emblem is multiplied by 3. Both games do this, but the way it is done in FE is that you first do the attack minus defense, and once you have calculated the damage, that damage value is multiplied by 3. However, what Elvandia Story decided to do was to take the attack stat multiplied by 3 if critical minus defense, and that equals to damage. That's a very big and very insane decision to change the formula in such a way. It doesn't really take an understanding of complex math. Very basic mathematics would have taught you that this is a kind of very swingy form of critical hit, because in case you're wondering, here's how big of a difference would be, right? If you had an attack of 5 and a defense of 3, what would happen is that because of the Fire Emblem formula, you would take 5 minus 3, so that's 2, and you would take 2 and multiply that by 3 if the person critical hits, so you deal 6 damage. It's a lot more still than doing just the 2, but it's still just not too insanely higher. Elvandia Story basically multiplies it beforehand. So if you take the 5 and 3, this means you're taking 15 minus 3. Yeah, so you're gonna deal like 12 damage instead. You're dealing double of the critical hit damage of Fire Emblem, and you're doing damage in a multiple of 6 to what you have initially had done. So what this basically means is that it renders most of the enemy's defense irrelevant when you critical hit, because if I had 3 attack and 3 defense, in Fire Emblem my crit would have been 0 as well, because 3 minus 3, 0, 0, 0 all the way. But in Elvandia Story, my 0 damage would have gone to 6 damage in this specific situation. But the thing is that we're not working with such small numbers within the game. Enemies have defense of up to 14, and the player's attack stat alone are around 12, thereabout most of the time. And what this means is that whenever you critical hit, your attack is actually going to something like 60, which is almost like double or triple the HP of most enemies within the game. So basically, as long as you crit, you kind of get your way through almost every single enemy.
This, and this, and this. Doesn't seem like anything's working. Shit. Well, I mean, I don't have anything else I can try, so take this! Yeah, I don't get it.
Like, I don't know in what situation this would feel like the better thing to do from a you want the game to be challenging sort of perspective. If you wanted to make a pachinko game, right, a pachinko strategy game, I feel like maybe this would be better, because the attack damage numbers are so swingy that it probably just like triggers something in the brain. It just fires off the neurons every time you crit, even though like half the damage is going to waste because it doesn't actually do anything. But aside from that, in most situations with a strategy game in particular, where the goal is to provide a challenging situation that the player has to overcome and think their way through, this kind of crit calculation is very weird, because it encourages very redundant and less strategic brute forcey play as well, because it basically leads to the situation of the player looking at the situation at hand and thinking, okay, so I'm already fucked by the balance because they added new equipment alongside the base stats of all the equipment being the same as in FE more or less. So more often than not, my characters are doing 0 damage, but I can crit and actually punch through the damage. So instead of just like strategically trying to use the right characters for the right situation, I'm gonna send everybody at the single one character, hit him twice every single turn, and pray for a fucking crit, because that would just like nullify the entire situation at hand. It's very silly, and I can see situations where maybe it might work, but this doesn't feel like the right genre or type of game to be doing it with. And aside from all of that as well, it just feels like the enemy variation in this game is very boring. Like it feels like when I played it at the very least, like there were only 8 classes. Like you had the basic infantry, you had the heavy infantry, you had the cavalry. That I don't think there was a heavy cavalry. It feels like all cavalry in the game is just the one similar, same-ish unit. You had the archer, you had the mage, you had the thief, both of which didn't have a higher end class either. And you had the the kite infantry? Like, I don't understand what they're trying to go for. Like, when I first saw the kite infantry, I was so confused at like what the fuck I was looking at. Like, I feel like they were trying to go for a lower fantasy thing. They didn't want to do the Fire Emblem thing with the Pegasus Knights and the Wyverns and all of that. But even then, it's like, why a kite? It's like the silliest fucking like ninja play they could have done. Like this reminds me of those like fucking animes where they have the person on the kite with the ninja on it. It's just going like woo. It's like they're on that and they're firing at you with crossbows. It's this infantry in the game. Fun fact, you don't actually get a kite infantry, by the way. You also don't really get any cavalry as a base class. Like your base classes in the game are all foot infantry, and some of them only get cavalry as they upgrade into the upper class. So you actually have a very boring repertoire on your side of the field as well. Now granted, your basic infantry are a bit more varied, but the thing is that the basic infantry that you have, it doesn't really matter as much, as in the difference in variety doesn't really matter as much, due to the fact that for some reason it seems like they might have actually gotten rid of the weapon triangle as well. Now I get what some of you might be thinking, right? Some of you might be thinking, yeah, but the weapon triangle sucks, it's not realistic at all. We were talking about a shitty ass like game from 2007 here. I don't think most people are actually caring too much about the realism of the thing, more so than whether or not it is fun. And the thing with the way that the weapons have been designed now as a result is that it's not like they made it even more realistic. It's not like your spears all have the ability to hit 2 spaces away. It's not like your swords have the ability to parry and are more versatile than the axe. They just kind of go into the individual stat niches that they already had in Fire Emblem, except now that you lose the strategic depth of the rock, paper, scissors that goes on in the back that you need to think about when repositioning your units to deal with specific enemy types. So they basically dumb down the game in that respect without giving it any unique charm to make it feel either more realistic or more interesting either way. So while you do have more basic infantry types, like your hero main character person is a unique like warrior type, you have the spearman niche and the swordsman and axeman niche. All 3 of them basically don't really do anything all too different. They just kind of hit the enemy anyways, and because of this, the sword, because of the high defense stats in the game, actually end up being worse. Like the main character is one of the few characters who can actually use 2 different melee weapon types. He can use both a sword and an axe. I think like after the first 3 acts, I never actually used the sword anymore. I just swapped him completely to the axe because there is no reason to want to use the sword. It does less damage. His accuracy is above 100% all the time anyways, and he can still hit twice with an axe. And as a result, due to the lack of both player character, like your own unit variety and enemy unit variety, most stages tend to become very one-track because they tend to use the same like 2 to 4 enemy types per stages. Some stages even have only 1 enemy type and they just throw like 30 or 20 of them at you, so the stages get one-track really fast. And the thing with many of the enemy types as well is that it just feels like they designed them to waste your time as much as possible. They feel so shit and so useless, but they require such specific ways of dealing with them because of how they act in the stage that it just wastes your time even more. For example, the thief enemy, right? They actually don't prioritize attacking you. For some reason, they have been programmed to actually prioritize running headfirst into you, trying to steal your item and then standing in front of you and doing nothing. Like legit, if you had your hero stand there with like a full inventory, he would get surrounded by 4 thieves, all of whom would try to steal his item instead. And after they steal their item, they just kind of stand there and just continue trying to steal your item until you run out of items, and then they start attacking you. So what this means is that when you come up against the thieves, you are basically stuck in a time-wasting battle because you just need to keep manually attacking them instead. You can think of it as an issue of if there were 10 enemies and I had 10 units, his 10 units are gonna run into my 10 units and just stand there and steal my items, and I have to use my entire turn to attack them and on the spot before I can progress forward again. So what this means is that you end up in a very draggy battle because 1, you have to waste an entire turn to attack the enemy that's in front of you because they're not gonna attack you. 2, because once you beat them, you actually get back the stolen item, which means you're gonna have to deal with the item fucking pop up again.
Villain! I will get you for what you did to my parents. Prepare yourself, villain! Wait, no, if I attack you here, I think it might actually cause the game to crash, so I guess the only way I can do this is to just wait for him to attack instead. Ah! Hey, you stole my axe! I mean, I can't really use it, so it's fine and all, but never mind, I'll just wait for the next time. Ah! Is that my wallet? How did you even, like, bruh? Okay, fine. No more chances, you better attack me this time. Ow! You stole my precious Miku figure? You scum, I'll have you pay for that. Alright, job well done. Now to deal with the rest of those scum now. Where are they?
Like, in a way, I feel like you could say that they are actually attacking. They're attacking not your characters in the battle, but you as the player instead, because they're slowly cutting away and chunking away at your life by making you waste your time going through an entire additional turn to beat them before you can progress on, and also wasting your time to look at all of the silly animations that they force you to go through on the UI. And on top of that, almost all enemies also have ranged hybrid weapons along many of the stages. Like, I feel like in many of the stages that I come across, most of the basic heavy infantry, the cavalry, they just have javelins or like throwing axes or like whatever the fuck other ranged weapon alongside their base weapons. So the whole idea of this like mage classes in particular being like the magic class that will help get through the tanky enemy, the high armored ones, by attacking them with ranged attacks that try to punch through their armor. They can't really do that well because of the fact that the enemies are basically gonna throw an axe back at them that just deals half the HP in damage. And the thing is that if it was just one enemy, I don't think it's that much of a problem, because if it's just a one or a small number of them, you could then maneuver in a way that ensures that you can surround them, try to get your units to envelop and like whittle them down so the mage can attack them safely. Or you can build a proper like formation around the mage so the mage can like hit these guys on the back while the rest of your units protect them. But the thing is that like in some of the stages, like almost every single enemy has this. Like, you will get a sudden like battalion of like 9 or 6 knights. It will just rush in from the side and all of them will try to immediately swarm around you and attack you from range. And you basically have to deal with them by either sending your melee units one space forward, attacking on the spot and wasting an entire turn to just move that one space, or sending your mage in with the risk of getting killed. So it kind of feels like it takes away the unique niches of this class, as it puts them in a more vulnerable situation when almost every enemy you deal with can do this as well. And the thing is that they really like to put it on all of the highly mobile units in particular, and because of the fact that the enemies just have so many units, they kind of just swarm around you and just like harass you, with the worst part of this being that all of these ranged hybrid units, they tend to prefer to prioritize your softer units instead of the unit that's in front of them. But the thing is that because they put it on the highly mobile and also highly tanky cavalry units, because their cavalry units feel like an upper, I guess in a sense it really is, because you only get them at like tier 2. They're just sending a swarm of tier 2 units that half your front line can't even do damage to. You're just gonna hit them for 0 and take like 6 to 8 damage or something, so like maybe a third or half your HP. In the end, you get the same issue of you're kind of forced to settle with the meta play of just sending in the main character and his 2 or 3 invulnerable Terminator friends and just having like 4 people deal with the entire army instead of actually handling the game as you would in an actual strategy game by sending in units of different varieties to deal with different situations. But yeah, as I said before as well, thankfully though, there aren't really stakes in this game, so you don't really have to worry about sending people to their deaths, because apparently if your units die, they just like go inactive for the next battle, and the battle after that you can use them again. So yeah, that death isn't really a concept in this game anyways, except for the main character, because he's the only one that if he falls in battle just dies instantly. You'll have access to a permanent shop as well, so you can just buy all the weapons that you need. What? Worried about having to swap between the weaker and stronger weapons to preserve the stronger weapons for the later battles because of the fact that the amount of weapons you have are limited? But fuck that! Who cares about any of that anyways? Just get all the fucking weapons you want. Not like you even need the shop anyways, because every fucking enemy drops their fucking weapon and there are like 30 fucking enemies in a single map. So it makes no sense. The economy design of this game is actually horrendous. Like, they give you a shop that you don't need to use. Why are you giving me items that give me more gold if there's nothing for me to actually want to buy? Why are every single enemy in the game dropping items with the shitty ass UI that actually causes it to waste even more of my time, especially when they're dropping so much stuff that I have to open the fucking storage after every single attack? You get so much of the higher tier weapons that it's like, yeah, why do I need the lower tier ones? You don't really need to use them at all at some point. They just become irrelevant because the idea of weapon scarcity doesn't exist, and there isn't any scarcity on the resources or money and things like that as well, because they let you grind within the game as well, and it makes it feel even more like a mystery why every single enemy is dropping weapons, because it only wastes time, and you already have another system in game to let me get more weapons that is grinding and buying. The level design as well is actually really bad. Like most maps are either just big open space or narrow open space. There isn't really anything else. Like, there isn't really any form of map design in the sense of like you need to like go through specific choke points in a strategic way to get to specific villages to stop bandits from getting to them beforehand. There's no stakes on the map itself. It's all like, I think like 90% of the stages is just objective, defeat boss, and then the remaining 10% is objective, run away, and that's about it. Even on the missions where you save somebody, like someone's getting ambushed for example, and you see them and you go like, oh, don't worry mate, I'm gonna save you, and then you get to the stage. Yeah, if they actually died during the stage, it actually doesn't matter because it's just gonna come back after that in like 2 stages time. So there are no stakes or objectives that actually really are like unique to this game, and things like terrain don't really exist and don't really matter even when they exist. So it's not like, oh, oh yeah, you know, there's a mountain area here. If I put the unit in a mountain, they have higher avoidability. So I want to position my units in a way that I can use the mountain on my side to dodge the enemy's attack better. No, there's none of that. It's literally just open plains. Just get used to it. Just stand there in your formation and pray to the fucking high heavens that you don't die. The only time where the terrain does matter is when it's actually working against you. Like in the one stage where you start on the beach in like some kind of like Normandy fucking beach storming against like a bunch of fucking people flying in at you with kites. The kite enemies, by the way, are also really annoying because you can't hit them with melee attacks. You have to hit them exclusively with range attacks. Makes sense because they're flying in the air, but it's really annoying as well, since there was a stage where those were almost exclusively all of the enemies, so it made all of your melee units with no range weapons are just irrelevant. That's not very good design in my opinion, especially since that's the first stage you actually ever see them and they don't give you any explanation of how to deal with them. But yeah, with that stage, the sand on the beach, it basically just slows your speed down. I think like it actually reduces the amount of space you can move to like a third of its original value. So it just slows you down and makes you feel more sluggish, but it doesn't give you any defensive benefit either. So that's the only time where I feel like the terrain actually mattered at all, and it only served to make me feel like shit instead. So but yeah, so you can think about it this way, right? You have 28 stages in this game, and out of all of this, most stages follow one of these two variants. So you really aren't getting a lot of variants in the stage in a way that makes them feel meaningful, unique, or interesting. You can't really get that many of the higher end classes as well because you're restricted by the item, which I think you only get like 4 or 5 throughout the whole thing. So yeah, you're really playing with like a very small variety overall, and it got boring so fast that at some point I was just like switching off during the game. Like I literally could not play this game for sessions of like more than an hour at a time, because every time I reached like the 1.5 hour mark, I would start to get a fucking headache because of how boring the whole thing was. Even if I was trying to multitask something else, I would start to get nauseous playing this game because of how everything just seems built to frustrate me instead. One thing they did do that was pretty cool though was that the game actually has a splitting storyline. Did you know that? Like they actually did try to make it really interesting in that sense, where you can go down 1 of 3 different routes. The only thing is that they don't really teach you how to get down the routes, which I think is fair. Now, like many old games at the time didn't really do it either. But you know, usually this is all like left up to some very specific like key actions that you need to do, like some specific dialogue choices, specific characters that you need to recruit to your party or something like that, you know, depending on the game. You know, and it's not something as like arbitrary in this game as like who is the first person from the boss in a very specific stage at the very first quarter of the game. Like, I'm not joking. Like literally the way that the ending is decided is based on the end of chapter 6 when you defeat the boss. Who among the 3 specific characters that will die on that stage is the furthest away from the boss. Like that's it. That's the only thing that decides your ending. It is not communicated to you at any point in the game how it is decided. And the worst part about it all is that basically what happens is that at the end of chapter 6, after you defeat the boss, a landslide happens and the prince that you were supposed to save and 3 of your close like associates all fall off the fucking cliff and die. You get a scene of the prince just falling off the thing like a fucking ragdoll. Like they just go limp and just like fall down in the most spectacular like nosedive head first into the ground below and actually die. And out of the 3 associates, 1 of them will survive, which is the person that was furthest from the boss at the time of the boss dying. So the thing is that you don't really know at the time that this is even a random event. You don't even know that it's an event that can change, because it just looks like, oh, all 3 of them died, and then multiple stages later 1 of them comes back and says, oh cool, he survived, that's nice. And the game doesn't actually do anything with the ending where it shows them there. Like I got all the way to the end, the character that you saved doesn't really appear almost at all. He maybe gets like a very small dialect option at the very end along with everyone else, and in the final cutscene where everybody is showing up being like, yeah, we're gonna defeat you, Mr. Batman, he doesn't actually turn up in the cutscene either. So like it kind of defeats the purpose because you don't even know that he's supposed to be there. And the worst part about it is that depending on which ending you get, like all 3 endings are shit. Like there's no doubt about it. It's just the type of shit you're getting. Do you want the cliche shit, the short shit, or the Denpa shit? And that's about it. Because basically the 3 routes are the true route, the light and dark. Yeah, the true route is also arbitrarily decided by this. Like thankfully for me, the first time I played the game, I actually got the true route right away because of the fact that the guy that you need to get for the true route is the heavily armored guy. So he's the slowest member in your fucking party. So he took the longest to get to the boss. So I kind of just gave up and didn't send him there. And that's the only reason he survived and the only reason I got to the true route. So for the true route, what basically happens is you kill God. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Like, the whole thing with the true route is that you reach the big bad. I guess I should explain the plot a lot. Basically, the main character, Ashare, his kingdom got attacked. He had to flee to the other kingdom. And then, like, together with the person, the king of the other kingdom, he's going on a journey to stop the war that the big bad kingdom is doing. And then you find out that there's someone in the background pulling the strings for the big bad kingdom. And after you defeat him, he goes on a monologue and goes like, You may have defeated me, but there will always be another like me. And then your teammate goes like, yes, there will always be another big bad, and it's all God's fault. It's very philosophical there. It's very corny, yeah. That's the true end, by the way. He just goes like, yeah, the gods, two of them, the good and the bad one. If not for their conflict, there will be peace on earth. We need to seal both of them away. And it's just like, yeah, and that's how the true end ends up with you like sealing both of the gods away. Gods, I say, but like you kind of just one-shot both of them with the main character. I guess that's something I forgot to mention. The main character's stats are balanced to be so fucked that he scales so well that by the end game, he kind of just becomes a one-man army. Like, he takes no damage from everything, and he one-shots basically everything. Like, this is the battle against the gods, by the way. Yeah, if not for the fact that he miraculously missed a attack on the Dark Demon boss, that one first attack, like, he would have just one-shotted both of them alone. Like, that's the level of the main character that we're talking about. Like, you're never truly in any danger throughout most of this game, and I feel like that's the biggest issue of it as well. You don't ever feel really challenged, you don't ever feel really threatened. You're just like sweeping through enemies that just feel very boring to go through. It's like playing a Musou game, except that the enemies in the Musou game are all, instead of attacking you, like, or like standing there to let you hit them to feel like you're a god, they're just like hitting you with like stun lock attacks every like 5 seconds, so that you just get like, go like, every few seconds instead, and you don't get to actually pull off your cool combos. It's like these enemies exist just there to blue ball you most of the time, because you're just such a god that can't be killed, so they just try to waste your time in the real life to kill the player instead before the character. But yeah, that's the true route. You kill the gods, I mean, you seal the gods away, and then you go back to your kingdom, and everyone goes like, wow, you did it, yay, all hail King Goodwood IV. Yeah, his family's name is Goodwood, yeah. I'm not even gonna make the joke there just writes itself, I feel like. Then you get a ending monologue that just goes like, and so the day has been saved, but many years from now, the gods will once again awaken and time will repeat itself. And you realize that like, oh, cool, so basically everything doesn't really matter, we just kind of like did a thing that delayed them. Yeah, okay. Why not? Meanwhile, for the light route, and remember, it's the light route, right? The one that you would think would be the good end, but it's actually not the good end since there's a true end. In this end, somehow you actually have to work together with a different like little boy who supposedly has the power of the light to defeat the dark man using the energies that exist within the world. He dies and gets wrecked while trying to seal away the bad guy. You attack the bad guy and you finish him off. Obviously, since you're the main character, you're going to kill him in one hit as usual. And then suddenly a vortex of dark energy comes out of nowhere and consumes the main character, which I find it really funny that the female protagonist tries to save him here by standing slightly ahead of the vortex and reaching out her hand, as if she were to grab onto him, she would be able to save him without getting sucked in herself. Plot then time skips 6 months in the future. Apparently, after getting sucked into the vortex, the main character just washes up to the shore somewhere else and was saved. And yeah, apparently he gets dementia or something, because he completely forgets everything that has happened till this point. He mentally regresses to like his mental state when he was a child, and they have an entire like really weird conversation about how like, look, he brought peace, look at the smile on his face, he looks so happy, look at this innocent smile on his face, all while knowing the fact that he has mentally regressed and lost all of his memories. Like, it's actually really dark and really weird and depressing in its own way. But yeah, frankly, I just did not expect the main character to get dementia before I did, so that's a little bit of a surprise. But yeah, suffice to say, the ending itself for a light end is really, really depressing in its own way. Like, if people thought, without realizing that this game had multiple endings, that this light route was the good end, like, holy shit, I can't imagine how pissed they must have been. And then you have the dark end, which is where the main character basically goes into like a maniacal rampage and becomes like the demon lord and kills all of his friends. It's very damper. In a way, it actually feels a lot more like the manga, if anything. Like, the manga actually felt like a lot more dark and like a lot more violence and death and like emotion in it, and the Denpa ending kind of feels like that. It's just that the Denpa ending doesn't really feel earned, because like there isn't really any hint of corruption going on throughout the thing. Like I mentioned, like the only changes in the entire story only begin in the last 2 chapters of the game, so like there isn't really like a build up all the way and he finally turns evil at the end. It's just kind of like, yeah, I guess I'm bad now, and then he just like kills his friends and like everyone else, and then goes on a maniacal rampage, and then the game ends there. So the worst part about all of this is that they don't actually communicate it to you that there's actually multiple endings. So if you actually actually reached these endings first or like earlier on, then you just didn't know there were multiple endings, you just reached there, it feels like it'll make the game feel like shit. Because if you didn't get the true end, the light end feels like shit, and the dark end just feels like a very, very bad and like twisted end, and it'll probably leave people so confused. I feel like the dark end isn't that bad, but like it feels like we've left people so confused thinking that this was the final end that I feel like it would probably have gotten the game even worse related if people didn't know about the other endings as well. Also, there was another thing with the true end, and I think this is the thing that basically became the biggest meme that came out of this game. The voices of the light and the dark gods, those two were actually voiced, unlike some of the other key characters in this game, and let's just say yeah. Yeah, they used the most Timu fucking like voice modulator they could find to actually give like just pitch shift the voice up and down on the same person. Like, oh my god, did they actually run out of budget by the end of the game? You're talking about like the two most powerful beings in the world in this world setting. Like, granted, they don't really have an appearance until the final chapter, so like maybe they're trying to save money, but like, oh my god, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, that sounds so horrible. Like, especially in Japan, right? I feel like the quality of voice acting is at a very high level. Like, granted, especially with anime, it took quite a few years to actually reach this point. Like, if you watch the earlier years of anime, like some of the voice acting tends to be a little more iffy, especially in the middle part of the entire like creation of anime. You know, like there's this middle point where like the quality just felt like it dipped, but then it got better again. But even then, this is just like and when you consider the fact that with voice acting, like in games paid by the word instead of by the session, so they're probably getting paid a lot more to just voice this than they would have if they were just paid for the session to come in, like with an anime. Holy fuck, what were they on? The CEO of this game voices himself just because he didn't want to pay a voice actor. Like, what is going on? But yeah, I mean, I guess the game wasn't all bad. Like, the music was fine. Like, some parts of the soundtrack were really nice. Like, I guess, like, some of it was, like, the soundtrack was serviceable at points and good at points. Like, it was the one thing with this game that didn't feel bad, was just the soundtrack. Because even with the character designs, like some of the characters look so mid and boring, like especially the people in the main party. Like, yeah, the main character and his one friend, they kind of Stanley, they kind of look fine, but like when you look at like the rest of the characters, like these guys over here, like they look like the most generic like NPC that you would see in other games. Like, these feel like they would be like random townsman ABC, like, or like random guard ABC in like some other game. Like in a Fire Emblem game, this would probably be like guy who is the neutral party like spearman town guard that you happen to save somewhere along the way. Even the enemy to go up against, most of them pop a lot more as a character. Like, you could say that this is more realistic. Like, oh yeah, these people look like what you would expect someone of a medieval like low fantasy time period to look like. But you know, you're making a game, you kind of want the people in your party to stand out, and it makes them easier to remember as well, right? You kind of want to design characters that even if they're just a supporting character or supporting role, you kind of want them to be memorable, both in terms of like a visual look, so people can easily pin a look to them, and also in terms of the personality, so that people can either resonate with the character or at the very least feel something interesting that helps them to remember the character better. But I feel like with most of the characters in this game, there just isn't any of that, especially because of the fact that unlike Fire Emblem, they don't really have the relationship bond thing where sometimes when the characters are together and they fight side by side, you get the chats in the middle of the battle and then it helps build their relationship and all of that. This game doesn't have any of that at all, so it just ends up being the case that it all just kind of crap. Most of them, they just don't really get much character building at all, and they just end up being very boring characters that aren't memorable in any way at all. Even the main character himself, he just feels like a piece of cardboard at times. He just feels very boring and generic as well, like your standard cookie cutter like good guy main character. So overall, I feel like most of it just didn't really work out as well as it could have. But yes, overall, that's most of what I have to say about this game. To me, I would probably rate this game along some of the lowest that that I've played so far. Maybe I should start doing a tier list and put a tier list like somewhere on the screen here so that everybody else can see the tier list and see how all these games like are ranked from my perspective as well. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. If you do, let me know. But yes, I guess you could say this is the story of Elvandia Story. Yeah. Sorry, got a little carried away there. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to the very epic people here who have to support the channel. I know not everybody supports for this type of videos specifically, but I do enjoy making them along with all the other content. Plus, you know, like the game industry content as well takes quite some time to actually prepare. The same for these. These actually take quite a while as well, especially because of the skits and stuff in the middle whenever I do them. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. And this look into one of the games that almost became the worst game of Japan, the Kusoge game of the year of 2007, and only didn't get that position because of the fact that we'll talk about that game in the future. But yeah, let's just say that there's much worse than this out there as well. But that's it. Thank you all for watching. I'll be seeing you next time. But until then, take care and Salaryman, go!